I've just realized you can see my Batman pajamas. Well, just got finished Friday the 13th Part 2. You know, the one where he comes around. Not much really to the plot, just a bunch of camp counselors in training getting picked off one by one. So, is this the ultimate horror sequel, or is it just another one in the old chain of the franchise? Well, I'd like to think it actually is one of the best horror sequels. Direct sequel, I guess we should say, because a lot of these horror films now have franchises rather than just one or two movie spin-offs. Well, I love this movie as a follow-up to Friday the 13th. In fact, I like it better than Friday the 13th. And here's why. First off, it does exactly what a sequel should do. And that is acknowledge, accept, and respect the original film. And this movie does that constantly. It does a nice little recap. It has the main character of the last movie showing up in the opening scene. It just kind of plays homage to it. It plays Timbits. It has a great little moment where Mama Voorhees' head shows up. It just knows what came before, knows its elder, and it loves it for it. So fantastic. The other really great thing this movie does is by raising the stakes. In a horror sequel, you need to do that. Take, for example, Aliens compared to Alien. It's in the title. Raising the stakes is so important to a sequel. And this movie does that by introducing Jason. I can't even think of a bigger raising of the stakes than just taking your mom, having her die in the first movie, and then having the son, the legend, the creepy kid in the boat, come back and be your movie monster for the sequel and for the rest of the franchise, really. It had such a great physicality to the character and certainly a lot more menace. He does become played for laughs later on, but he's always this, like, immovable object who just keeps coming for more and more with no real reason. This movie does try to give him some depth and interesting reason, and I enjoy that too. And just like the first one where you kind of feel sympathy for his mom, in this movie you kind of feel sympathy for him too. He's been out on his own and he saw his mom die and he's taking his revenge. Speaking of revenge, that opening sequence, God, that's amazing. Killing Alice is such a ballsy move for a sequel to do. Where I did say this movie does pay respect to the original, it's such a great little moment where it's like, this isn't the original. We're going to kill the main character of the original. And we're going to start fresh, and we're going to plow on our own. And plow on the own they do. This movie has more characters, but better characters. The movie does a really good job of pretty much thinning out the cast at it about, just a little over the halfway mark, sending everybody out to town, leaving us with our core cast of characters. It's a weird group because normally I would say these characters feel a little flat. They're certainly not your most developed people in the world, but the really nice thing about them is they're not stereotypical. A lot of horror films, particularly these days, love to fill their movies with the nerd, the jock, the funny one. And this is supposed to be the way we identify with them, but it just becomes, well, cliche and boring. This movie, on the other hand, yeah, it doesn't overly develop most of the characters besides the main two, but what it gives us is just very realistic, interesting people who aren't really easily identified. And I like that. I mean, I know they're not memorable for the most part, but I enjoy seeing conversations and not knowing exactly where they're going to go. Oh, this is the funny one. He's got to have this response, or this is the jock. He's got to have that response. No, this movie just throws that all to the wind and says, fuck it. These are great characters. We're just going to have some fun with them before they die. It's really refreshing to actually see that in not only a horror franchise, but in a horror sequel. Normally you would get this kind of pandering where they like try to almost remake the original and get that feel across, but this movie doesn't even attempt to do that. God, I love this movie. This one is definitely one of the highlights of the series. The other really great thing I noticed about this movie is the fact that it has much tighter directing as well. Now, this isn't the same director from the first one. He stepped down when the sequel was being made, and I'm kind of glad he did. There are a lot of great moments in this movie that just rely on quick timing. For example, when somebody's going to open up a window and all of a sudden Jason's hand bursts through. It's such precise moment and great editing and just that nice little cut that makes it just so jumpy and tense and fun. Same thing goes for all the deaths. Using certain camera tricks and letting it linger. And it's definitely a tighter, better made, better written, better everything kind of film. And that's exactly what you wanted of a sequel. So glad that they decided to make this. And hey, they kill Ralph. That's gotta stand for something, eh? Again, just like killing Alice. We're not your sequel. I mean, we're not your typical Friday the 13th film. We're stepping this up a bit, guys. Let's say goodbye to what we were before, and let's introduce to what we are now. And did they introduce something big? Jason. So, that's Friday the 13th Part 2. How did the body count stack up? Well, it's kind of a tough one. Technically 9 was the body count, but if you watch Part 3, they hint at Paul, one of the main characters in this movie, actually dying with not really being shown. So that puts it between 9 and 10, which is actually just in the same realm as the first movie. So it doesn't really try to step it up in that regard, which is kind of nice. That's how sequels tend to be, eh? What else do I got in my notes that I want to talk about real quick before I move this thing along? Nothing. I'm feeling pretty good, guys. I enjoyed the hell out of that movie, so my energy's high. Let's keep it going by watching Part 3.